between Ethiopia and Eritrea in 1998. Most of the soldiers, the most effective fighters in the Ethiopian army came from Tigray. So there's an element of, feedback in what they're doing to the civilian population in Tigray.
Are there any resources that are at play here? Like, I'm just trying to understand the motivations outside of just
not so much comparable to, let's say, the conflict in Eastern Congo, where you have rich resource-wise Eastern Congo. So you have all these players. You got Uganda invading, Rwanda invading, supported by multinational corporations. Or mining resources of the conflict was going on in Eastern Congo, but it's not the similar type of narrative. The only other big issue in Ethiopia, of course, was this big dam, this grand Ethiopian dam that they built, and now they're filling it up. And at that time, it was leading to a conflict with Egypt, because Egypt, of course, is concerned that once the dam is built, it will affect the flow of the Nile and severely impact Egypt's agricultural production. In fact, the biggest talk before this whole conflict started was, might Egypt and Ethiopia go to war? And that has not receded because the dam has now been built and Egypt continues to protest. So some people believe that perhaps Egypt was also playing a role in promoting the conflict by encouraging Tigray to take up arms. So that is the other major outside factor playing into this situation.
Is there any prospect for some type of brokered peace, or
I think so. The African Union is taking a much more aggressive position now in insisting for a dialogue. The United States have been insisting on negotiated outcome as well, and the UN. But I think between November and maybe June, the response was a bit was not as vigorous coming from the United States and the UN. But I think they really did believe. When he said this was going to be a swift operation, and I'm going to be able to rein in this rebellious regime, and that would be it. Of course, it didn't turn out that way. When you unleash war, things never turn out the way that people anticipate. This humanitarian disaster has been created. The U.S. could no longer ignore that. And then, of course, once the tide changed militarily on the ground, this is a whole new ballgame. Clearly, it's clear that there can be no military solution. And I think that's why now we're seeing more aggressive push for negotiated solution.
Are there any U.S. interests? I would maybe it's a bit of a bank shot with Egypt, but are there any direct U.S. interest there? And also where is China? Doesn't China have a huge investment in Ethiopia?
Yes, of course. China is one of the biggest investors now in Ethiopia. China has actually built much of Ethiopia's infrastructure. The bridges, the roads, the massive buildings. Ethiopia, in fact, was a hopeful story out of, many out of springs from Africa in the last couple of decades. By Western bourgeois standards, it was doing well. The economy growing at 67% per year, although we know in a lot of cases the stats are meaningless if it does not translate to the grassroots. But nevertheless, compared to other African countries, doing pretty well. And the U.S., of course, was not happy that Ethiopia has developed a stronger relationship with China. But China is going to offer loans and build these infrastructure. Why would Ethiopia refuse that? So yes, there was a lot of pressure on Ethiopia to turn more toward the U.S. rather than China. In fact, as a result, the IMF and World Bank have offered significant financing to Ethiopia last year as a result of that pressure.
And so the U.S. is looking to at least promote some measure of stability and peace, and preferably with with Ahmed's government.
Absolutely, preferably with Ahmed's government and with Ahmed on the U.S. Side, of course, away from China. Steering Ethiopia away from China with IMF and World Bank loans. Obviously, the war was unanticipated. And that is why I think the U.S. was reluctant to come out hard against Ahmed initially, But after the result of the humanitarian crisis, it cannot be ignored. So it has to take a much more even-handed approach now in resolving this crisis.
Well, hopefully there'll be some resolution soon, because it sounds like there's hundreds of thousands of lives in the battle. Great. Well, Milton Alamati, the book is Manufacturing Hate, How Africa Was Demonized in the Western Media. We will put a link to that at majority.fm. It's fascinating stuff. Much. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you to both you and Emma.
Thanks.
Be well. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you. All right, folks. Going to take a quick break. Come back. We will wrap things up for this first half of the program. All right, folks. That's it for us. If you are watching us on Peacock, we will say not adieu. What is it again? Au revoir. Au revoir. Thank you.
But one would think that maybe you just should stop attempting it.
In French.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't give up so easy. I'm not going to. That's not.
But you also don't try at all to learn what the right.
You're doing Duolingo every day.
Exactly. And I have a nice mix of total refusal to give in, and also total refusal to actually sort of like win.
Right.
So that's the
Do what it takes.
yeah, exactly.
Do what's necessary to win.
Yes. So folks should really check out Manufacturing Hate. It's fascinating, and I cannot state enough how dominant something that the New York Times had decided was the reality for so many decades. But if you're watching us on Peacock, we will say see you tomorrow. And for those of you who are still here, bon chance.
Good luck.
Yes, good luck.
Good luck. You gotta deal with us for the next.
Okay, bon chance. You have good luck as we continue.
By the way,
Sam
transition goes with French miles to the point. Bill has a Patreon too, with the African History Club podcast that has 99 patrons. So somebody I would have thought.
Oh, it's gonna be number 100.
Yeah, but yeah, he does very good. I mean, he does a lot of great content. Just super knowledgeable guy.
Check that out. We will put a link to that as well in the podcast and YouTube descriptions. Folks, speaking of which, speaking of subscriptions, I have an idea for you that is completely free. Well, it is our AM Quickie newsletter. You can head over to majority.fm, sign up, scroll down to the bottom of the page, sign up for it, and every morning you will get an email from either Jack or Corey, who are giving you stories that you might want to know for the advance of the day. Stories that we don't even cover on the show, because there's a lot of news out there. They find stuff that you may be interested in, but you won't necessarily hear. And it is all free. You don't seem terribly impressed about it.
I think I heard you were telling.
Yeah, it's mesmerizing. The idea of all free.
Yeah.
Check it out. Head to majority.fm. And also, you can support this show.
Like the stream, poggers, bing bing.
Like the stream. Give us a thumbs up. Make a comment. YouTube poggers. become a subscriber on
The bing was like you doing each action, right?
Yep, Bing.
Bing, subscribe, like Bing.
And you can also support the whole show by becoming a member at jointhemajority.report.com. When you do, you support the free show and you get extra content. So there you go. Check it out. Don't forget Nomi's show on Wednesdays and Fridays. YouTube.com/Nomiki Show. And Matt, what's happening in the Matt Leckian universe of media?
So as you mentioned, Unconfined of the AM Quickie, we had him on for a patron-only show for Left Reckoning this weekend. We talked about UFOs. He's a little bit more into the UFO stuff than I am, but we joined together to bash the skeptic community response, which we both think is sort of lazy rehashes of 90s arguments and sort of get curious about what's going on in the sort of deep state. Why are we having this discussion about UFOs?
Why are we?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, there are things out there that are being sensed that we don't really know what they are, apparently. It could be, in either interstate rivalry, it could be Chinese, for instance, or it could be maybe has something they don't want to tell anyone, or a sort of maybe Blackwater has some new technology and they're buzzing ships and stuff like that.
Right.
Or it could be aliens. So we talk about that, and we also talk about another alien, Peter Thiel, what he's doing with Jake Vance and the candidates he's supporting, as well as should we be more concerned about right-wingers being entrapped by the police or coordinating with them? So we talk about a wide range of topics. That's patreon.com/leftreckoning to get that conversation.
Sounds really good. Interesting.
It's really good. And also, Corey has a big bushy beard now. I thought like my pandemic hirsuteness.
Say it again?
Hirsute about hairiness, right?
Okay.
I thought my pandemic hairiness was unchecked. The Corey's got a big bushy beard that looks like the.
Oh, just because your hair's long now?
Yeah, I got a little on hair, and I'm also doing more. Well, I guess I was doing the mustache before.
Yeah, you were rocking a mustache.
I think of hairiness in terms of facial hair and other areas, not really like
That's not
hair.
my legs. So.
Well, your hair,
Well, no, that's always been hairy. That's not
this is all fun stuff.
Yeah.
I can't even give away this content for free.
It got hairy legs.
Folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half. All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half. You ready?
Alpha males are back. Boy, back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you can imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy, back. And the alpha males are back. Just wanted to play the white man. The alpha males are back.
I take all of it tonight.
Alpha males are back.
Stop there says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a backbite.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Cedar, what a fucking nightmare. Yeah, our couple put them in rotation.
Well, the couple of numbers are like 45 seconds long.
So white people do the drugs much worse than normal white people, and all white people are disgusting.
And the alpha males are psycho.
Stop there says what? Stop there says what?
Hell of a lot of back. I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of back. Hell of a lot of back. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych. The alpha males are back. the Africans are black African, and the alpha males are black, and the Africans are black. See y'all stuff out there, that's one of why you think that Americans are be taking over by the honest. Keep it at 100. Can't master us. Come on, buckle. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, you boy. I have a thought instead of and the alpha males are black. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are black. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price. Watch me around here. I am a total.
We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I guess we aren't back. I'm back. And oh, look, now we are back. There we go.
We're on camera.
I decided to take a little jog.
Yeah, well, you know, I
right.
gotta get my steps in.
Honestly, I've done 500 steps to the commissary.
Right. Well, I know, and I have to wear that big key around my neck. The duplicate.
We're going to, we should just say, there was still watching what's going on with the Line 3 protests. And this is another oil pipeline crossing the Mississippi River. And there have been attempts at the end of last month to essentially prevent it being built. And there's two women who were just sentenced to prison, or just about to be. I did an interview about this for the Peacock show over the Dakota Access Pipeline. And what they were doing is they were going basically like sabotaging it being built, trying to increase the expense of building. And essentially, you've got people, Walz, the governor in Minnesota, approved the building of the pipeline. I think this was fairly recently. And basically, you've got a group of folks, water protectors, indigenous folks, who are, trying to essentially protect our waterways. You remember, there was a huge spill by Colonial. They made it into the news because they were like cyber hacked, right? Cyber attacked. The real story was unrelated, I believe, to this, but sometime around this time last year, there were a couple of kids who were riding their mountain bikes in the woods, and they came upon this area where there was oil bubbling up from the ground, and a Colonial pipeline, which is the biggest one on the East Coast, had sprung a leak. The terrifying thing about this is Colonial did not know. And for there to be enough oil that is actually bubbling up around the ground, these things are built, are buried, I don't know how many feet down, 6 feet, more maybe. The idea that there's so much oil that has leaked at that point, that it's bubbling up, and it is not picked up by the supposed sensors that are telling you that there's leaks. You understand the implications of that if that pipeline is, I don't know, in Mississippi. And you can go and look over the course of the past year as Colonial slowly either reveals or understands the size of this leak. It's massive. It was, I mean, there was so much oil that was in the ground. And had that been, I mean, obviously it's going to have detrimental effects for all sorts of the environment around it, but had it gone through the Mississippi, I mean, the devastation would have been amazing.
Yeah, and we should say for the Lion Free protests too, the tactics used by police are escalating. There hasn't been a lot of reporting on this. Of course, democracy now is having the activists on to say their piece, and the traditionally excellent way democracy now does some of this stuff, but it's very reminiscent of Standing Rock. Maybe not in terms of just the scale and the size, but I can't speak firsthand, but it seems like there have been multiple water protectors arrested, and police usage of excessive force in a variety of ways, tear gas, rubber bullets, etc. So, and plus this is also indigenous Americans who are leading the charge here, much like in with the Dakota Access Pipeline. So just it's crucial that we show our support.
I would recommend people get familiar with the concept of jury nullification when it comes to people arrested for things like this, which is where you basically decide that you don't want to apply the law despite evidence on certain cases, and a jury nullification is the concept that you should get more and more people talking about.
When people get on the jury and then they decide to,
Yeah, I mean, for instance, always, I got jury duty recently, we talked about this before the show, and I'm actually excited to go, and if it's going to be sort of a drug charge or something like that, I'll just invoke jury nullification. And
when they question
They have no idea what they're in for.
it's like when you're sort of coming to a verdict, you can just say, and the defense lawyers can't pitch this, say, hey, regardless of the evidence, you should just say he's not guilty. But as a jury, you can do that. Say, I don't believe in this law, and I'm just not going to go not guilty.
I would imagine they would question you that before you get up there.
Well, I'm not going to mention it before.
But if they ask you and you lie, you may have a problem. The best answer to that is I'm thinking about that.
Yeah.
Or you say it at the end of the trial, I didn't even know what that was until that whole concept, until they brought it up at the questions. So up until that moment, but then I started to think about it, and I'm like, hey, wait a second.
And you know what? All of this is on camera now, so
Oops.
it could be used by the defense or the prosecution, whichever way, in order to talk about. Yeah.
All right, let's get into, we're going to get to IM's phone in just a moment, but we should just say, Fierce Deity 73, any reason the Bullfrog Fun app intro has been taken out of the rotation? And, folks, I will say, I just asked Matt this, he's like, oh yeah, no, I forgot. It's just that is not a criticism of Matt, it's just a lot of times people just don't understand the power of just happen. In the context of everything.
It's producerial laziness. It's not loaded on this new computer yet. But
and it's
we'll
just
bring it back tomorrow.
right, and the Crowder thing was so.
Speaking of producerial, so much for the mystery surrounding that. It's one of those things where those hot buttons really need to hit when the joke is there.
Right. That's the function of the soundboard.
Yeah. The old say something and then wait 7, 8 seconds before. That doesn't work as well.
Doesn't matter.
Folks, we again, the dynamic in terms of this infrastructure bill is pretty fascinating. The bipartisan bill is essentially, for people on the left, a somewhat, I guess, maybe necessary evil insofar as, if this is what it takes to get the 50 members of the Democratic caucus to vote for the reconciliation bill, then fine. Now, it remains to be seen what Kirsten Sinema is going to do.
It's also not as evil as it could have been. The privatization.
Oh, that stuff is gone. I mean, this bill is
significantly. It's fine.
This bill is more or less, at least as we know it now. There may be changes, but as far as we know now, it's actually like a decent but insufficient, significantly insufficient bill. It does have some problems in that it's supposedly, although I imagine I've been told by the people who cover these things that they'll be able to work around it. That it has that it caps some of the expenditures on some of these things, like let's say broadband or something like that. But they'll figure out another way of getting that in there in the reconciliation bill. That remains to be seen. But largely, it's like a insufficient, but no problem. For the right, it is like they're voting for Medicare. And here's Maria Bartiromo basically teeing up the Trump campaign for 2024 by saying, he's just going to get out there. I'm not making any compromises like the evil Biden bill or whatever they call it. Biden infrastructure. Here is Maria Bartiromo.
Well, wrong. Hey, let's look at what's in the bill. First of all, let me ask you, is there any money in this bill?
1 second. This is North Dakota, Senator. Low representative. She's Congress? Oh, wait, no, that was a senator. He's a senator. Yeah.
Whoa, wrong. Hey, let's look at what's in the bill. First of all, let me ask you, is there any money in this bill that goes to the border? Is there any acknowledgement from the Biden administration that we're in a border crisis and he needs to address it? Any money here in the border? Because I see resilience and water storage, environmental remediation, energy department, power infrastructure, electric vehicles, nuclear companies, a lot of beginnings to the Green New Deal.
Well, first of all, cybersecurity and resiliency of the grid is not exclusive to the Green New Deal. And I think we've all experienced the problems with the lack of resiliency to our energy infrastructure. I mean, the Colonial Pipeline cyber attack was a pretty good example of that. Now, are there some things that Democrats like? For sure. Are there some things missing that we would love? Of course there are, but this is a 50-50 Senate. Democrats have a majority in the House and the White House, so you're going to have to take some of those things and all the other really good things. And all of those other things that you referenced are, again, exclusively democratic principles. There are some other things some of those things that contribute to the overall infrastructure of our country, and this is all part of infrastructure. You might argue some of it. I don't like the electric vehicle charging stations, for example. If I was king, I wouldn't support that. But unfortunately, our voters gave us something other than a king.
Well, you're not a king. None of the Republicans are king, but it certainly seems like the Democrats act like kings. In addition to all of that money beginning a Green New Deal, it also dictates rules in areas that have traditionally been managed by local authorities, like drinking water, even as it muscles in on private sector enterprises like broadband. So once again, we see the Democrats taking power away from the governors and putting it on the federal level. Is that fair?
It was not fair. It may be fair in a couple of areas, with regards to broadband, for example, or water, for example. But here's one thing that I fought really hard for: permitting reforms.
I can't even believe this is just unbelievable.
Because it sounds like the Green New Deal.
Right, but it's not. I mean, even that is just what are they arguing here? Right? Just go governors really want control of the pipeline. We know how well that worked out in Michigan, for instance. We'll poison thousands of children. We want governors to have the ability to poison hundreds of thousands of people. I mean, this guy's out there talking about we don't want charging stations for electric vehicles. It's like in 1993. Rush Limbaugh used to talk about the Priuses. And they come on the highway and they can't go very fast and they're going to get run over by my SUV. And that's the way you do it. And it's like the idea that this is sort of they're arguing over nothing. And then on top of that, there's no even talking points here. It is honestly just the most sort of an anemic. It is really just sort of You're not Donald Trump. I mean, it's just bizarre to me. There's no policy argument going on, and there's no politics argument going on.
It's bizarre too, because Kramer, it's not like he has to worry, from what I understand, about a Democratic challenger or whatever he's in North Dakota. And North Dakota is about as Trumpy as you get. So, like, it's bizarre. I'm almost surprised that he's doing this.
Well, he's
Like going on the news, and like, yeah,
we're supporting it from supporting the bipartisan bill.
yeah, exactly. Well, no, the reason why he's supporting the bipartisan bill is because
it benefits him
they
probably.
want highway funds.
It's a popular bill. It's a popular bill, and right, like we can talk about, how much it appeals to the Trump base, but that's not gonna, I think, be remembered or stick in people's minds when there's like a significant infrastructure improvement in rural areas of North Dakota. Part of probably why he's supporting this is because it is a rural state, and some of the things that are included, as he says, include like broadband and internet infrastructure. Like these, I mean,
this is all pork bill. I mean, essentially, it's desperately needed, and maybe it's in the wrong definition of pork, but everybody's going to be bringing home something.
And it helps the industry in the state, too, and it helps his donors. So it's like people like him and Bill Cassidy have to straddle this line where they are giving lip service to the bizarre cultural elements like Green New Deal, like has AOC stink all over it, and like, oh, critical race theory, there's equality in this bill. Like, that sounds like we like black people somewhat. They have to pretend like they're giving credence to those thoughts when in reality they're like, well, I want to do some government. I don't want to just be, a Trump speech crystallized.
Here is Bartiromo is not satisfied. She's like,
oh man,
where is the racism in this? It's not enough. It's not enough that Joe Biden's still operating under Title 42. It's not enough that we still have no new DACA recipients at the moment. Where is the overt racism in this bill, Senator? I don't see it. This is clip number 3.
Now, with regard to the southern border, obviously we're not going to get Democrats to agree to a bill that builds a wall. I think that would be pretty.
Why not?
Why not?
Why not? Why not just work for the American people? We've got a wide open border. We've got 6,000 people coming across the border every single day. 210,000 apprehended in the month of July. Why not demand that they fix the border before anything else? And by the way,
6,000 people coming across the border every day. Imagine how Bartiromo would feel if like 100,000 were getting infected by COVID every day. Sorry, here there.
well, it doesn't even matter. Probably the Democrats who helped craft this bipartisan bill rightly understand that no matter what Biden does, no matter how draconian he is, no matter how he only closed 2 of the ICE contract facilities or ended those contracts and maintained a great majority of them from the Trump era, and how he, since February, has doubled detentions of migrants crossing the border, it literally doesn't matter if he put on a red MAGA hat and said, I'm going to build a wall. It wouldn't matter. They are going to criticize him for being soft on the border anyway, and then you have DeSantis in Florida blaming his own failures on the border, which is just a fiction. And they repeat the same lie until it feels true, and that's like the fact that she can get herself worked up so much over that lie. That fascinates me too in terms of the psychology perspective. Does she even identify it as not a truth anymore, or is she just deep in it? Like,
a good question. That is actually a good
like
question.
work on behalf of the American people. That's what he thinks he's doing, as Matt pointed out, right? This is actually going to help people in his state. That's part of it.
Hey, highways.
Should we play one more of this?
I think so.
All right, listen. I love to watch Kramer be sort of befuddled by here. Here is Kevin Kramer basically trying to sort of just like hint at maybe he just feels safe, but he is about to say some sacrilege. I'm surprised.
This is one doozy of an interview. We got 3 separate clips.
I'm sorry. I'm surprised they didn't bleep this out on Fox News.
Yeah, wow.
end this question with President Trump's commentary on it, because President Trump also had a statement on.
Should just inform everybody, Donald Trump is no longer president in the rest of the world outside of where Maria Bartiromo is. But how many times do you think they refer to just President Obama? Probably not many times. Or President Clinton.
Barony.
President Carter. Go ahead.
Because President Trump also had a statement on the infrastructure package, and he says Joe Biden's infrastructure bill is a disgrace. It will be used against the Republican Party in the upcoming elections in 2022 and 2024. It will be very hard for me to endorse anyone foolish enough to vote in favor of this deal. And you say?
Well, he didn't give one reason why it's a bad deal, other than it's Joe Biden's, and I understand that. I understand his frustration, and he's obviously got influence and has a legitimate opinion. But the fact of the matter is, the American public, including the vast majority of Republicans, are very supportive of this. Everybody from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the Business Roundtable to my local convenience stores and labor unions support this bill. There's some nearly 200 organizations that have come out in support of this bill. We need roads and bridges, so we're falling behind our competitors, particularly China, with regard to transportation infrastructure. It is what moves goods and services around the world. So
now I recognize there's a lot of support for this on both sides. Definitely a lot of support in this. I get that.
Yeah, well, as soon as he said China, it's off there a little.
I was gonna say, like, I'm surprised he didn't lead with that. Like, we're in a race against China.
Yeah, might have altered the tone of the interview, but I love how Trump's quote just does all of her work for her.
It's
right. That's all she needs.
That is I mean, this is the.
She's a proxy.
This is going to be the dynamic in the in 2024, and those people who are going to support this bill are just hoping that people won't notice. But Trump, of course, is going to ride this. I'm telling you, he's going to call it the Biden infrastructure bill, and this is what's going to be fascinating. They're going to, if the reconciliation bill, both bills pass, Trump is going to take the stuff from the reconciliation bill and attribute it to the vote that the Republicans in the Senate and, if any, in the House do for the bipartisan bill. And, I mean, it's going to be a fascinating dynamic when you start to get into 2022. And Donald Trump is blaming the Republicans for, universal pre-K. Now, if the Republicans were not so demented, they'd say, yeah, well, it's partly maxed up, but they won't be able to vote for it. This dynamic, we're just getting a preview of it. I mean, because this is where it's going to go. They're going to talk about the infrastructure bill was a Biden bill, and that's it. I don't. I was going to say I feel bad for Kramer, but not quite. I really don't. He's a great guy, and others didn't give a reason as to why I shouldn't vote for it.
He was fully loyal to Trump every second.
Of course.
I guess he just doesn't want to call President Trump anymore.
Nerd Cheetah. 2 days ago, I saw Reverend Al Woke scolding unnamed trust fund progressives with Scarborough, citing himself as the true heroes of yesteryear, now nestled comfortably at the establishment breast. Was he truly offended that this generation might want a better world, even more that today's progressives willingly point out those in the chokehold on change, much like those of Sharpton's age once did? Of course, Al picked the right audience for his 10-year pitch. Scarborough was all about it, and the only thing he missed was Donnie Deutschbag's input. You say you're anxious about COVID. Imagine an elementary teacher as we approach the beginning of the school year with policymakers desperate not to draw the ire of the donor class, pretending it's all about individual choice and responsibility. Believe me, it is. I feel for teachers. It's going to be. We're going to have a better sense, but I don't know what it's going to be. I'm afraid that we're going to have a real problem, and particularly if you're in a red state. That's interesting. We got this. There's a report out there, and I've seen this now. It was just covered, I guess, by the Miami Herald. Put up this clip. We got an email from a listener who is a teacher in Florida, and DeSantis is so terrified about what's going on with COVID. They are sending now $1,000 bonuses to Florida's teachers, like school staff, principals, anyways. I don't know if they're doing full school staff, and first responders. And the big sort of concession was it's not going to have the governor's logo on there. Can we put up these pictures, Brad? Let's see the first one. What's interesting is so this is actually coming from the $400 million in COVID relief, and they're using that to offer bonuses to teachers, principals, police, firefighters, pandemics, other first responders. DeSantis, of course, is trying to make it look like he's putting out that money. Here, put this up. Do we have it? Okay. All right, so and this is interesting. Well, put up the other one first. Put up the other ones first. Because they're trying to make it like, it's just like a, hey, great job, guys. We're all done. Don't worry about a thing. Here, put up that one. Okay, so, no, the other one. No, all right, well, there's a check for $1,000.
Oi. Oi, tudo bem? Está tudo. Recuperar aos poucos. Não. Está com expectação e tal. Isto já para indicar. E, sim. Estás aí. Não, temos que ir em casa, sim. Ela está para tudo. Ok. Já vou subir. Ok, então se quiser subir, eu vou ouvir. Até já. Tá bem. Certo, até já. Não é subir. Vai subir também dá para dar só que legal porque essa minha linha estão me usando mais medida
No, I want that the other letter, the first page letter. Sorry. And there's just sort of like disclaimer that they include in it that's not on the letterhead. So here's the one on the letterhead, and pop that up there. Okay, this past year is cutting with challenges that required an extraordinary level of determination and perseverance. Tens of millions of students throughout the country were denied the opportunity to attend school in person. Florida put students and families first. Which made it because so many other people are. Like, we're not going to put our families in front, kids first. We're putting our interest in not having a functioning society first.
Well, liberals don't want to kill the children and the abortions and such.
Made a huge difference for millions of students and families around the state. This would not have been possible without your best efforts. Do you see the word COVID in there? And DeSantis writes a letter, does not use the word COVID for pandemic
Or coronavirus.
or coronavirus. Nothing. It's just sort of like, hey, some of these libs were shutting down their schools, but you didn't. So here's a $1,000 bonus. Oh, and incidentally, here's our just, this is, put up the next one, the next letter. This is like the functional equivalent of that thing at the end of ads where they speed up the guy talking. None of those people who use that kind of thing, like this. Well, you put up that letter, rather. Here it is. And then there's the little bit of a caveat at the end here, which says this payment is a one-time payment to reimburse for reasonable and necessary personnel, family, and living and funeral expenses incurred as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. This could include the unreimbursed costs of home equipment and services, utilities, protective equipment, and cleaning supplies for personal use, childcare and educational materials, tutoring, health, wellness, and medical expenses not covered by insurance, costs of caring for and supporting vulnerable family members, and funeral costs. This payment is considered qualified disaster relief payment under Section 139 of the Internal Revenue Code. Qualified disaster relief payments under 139 are generally not includable in gross income for tax purposes and are not reportable as income on a federal income tax return. There may be tax implications depending on your individual circumstances. You should consult your tax advisor, of course, for more information. So,
please consult your doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you sprinkle like lime juice on it, hidden writing says, "Don't ask for any more." Nothing else.
Exactly. Thank God we made it throughout the whole political thing that was going on before, and then please see addendum for the actual reality of what's going on. Unbelievable. Rampaging Toaster. Today I was shocked to learn about the business plot, a 1933 conspiracy by wealthy businessmen to overthrow FDR and install a dictator. You didn't know this was Smedley Butler?
Bush, if memory serves.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Not Prescott.
Like the advanced, like older guy.
Bowser with Schnauzer, Sam and Emma, between the two of you. Which one is the chocolate? Which one is the paper? Alright. Respond to that. Emma knows corn. I feel like I'm being sacrificed going back to teach college in a tiny classroom in just a few weeks. It feels like the administration is burnt out, pretending to care and take precautions, so they're just acting like there are no concerns. I want to recommend a collection of short stories called Love After the End, a collection of speculative fiction by queer indigenous writers. It's really great writing, and it's also incredible to be pushed to consider climate catastrophe from a framework that posits apocalypse as plural, ongoing survival, etc., without being blind to the dangers we're facing. Interesting. That sounds good. Love After the End. Sure wrap. Been a while since I've been able to IM the show, so after getting my first post-pandemic job back in May, I've noticed that there's a lot of people who aren't vaccinated, even the ones who aren't crazy-ass conservatives, believe that the vaccines aren't that effective or effective enough to offset the complications that the vaccine could give you. It's been like herding cats to explain to them how wrong that thinking is.
I also just wonder, like the system, we always talk about access to healthcare, but I think like I got the vaccine, but I'm fairly confident that I could say like, hey, I'm out sick today. People that don't have jobs, like that becomes a much bigger hurdle, I think.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's true.
And that's also, I think, why you see that massive discrepancy and like the 50% fully vax number really hasn't moved.
Yeah.
And we hit 70% with one shot, but we're having issues. And now, I know that's so anecdotal, but based on the person that wrote in and said that they went to their pharmacy just to get the booster shot because they knew if maybe that's filtering some of it
We
too.
don't know how
We
many
don't
of those people are. That's a good point. Juicy. I finally watched pilot season recently and am convinced that Michael Scott from The Office was copied from you and John Benjamin's characters. I will tell you this, that Who's the Caboose, which was the prequel, it was, pilot season was a sequel to Who's the Caboose, was done about 4, 5, 6 years before the British Office. I did see the British Office somewhere, I think just before we shot, or just after we shot pilot season in 2003. Maybe it was. I think the British Office was out by then. But there are definitely some similarities. But I don't think so. Let's go to the phones, shall we? Calling from a 701 area code. Who is this? Where are you calling from? 701? 701, hang in there. 701. Can you hear me? Yes, I can now. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is Riley from North Dakota.
Riley from North Dakota. What's going on, Riley?
I would just like to appreciate all the Kramer slander earlier in the show. Those clips were an absolute treat.
There you go. He's a rhino.
I would also like to trigger or issue a trigger warning for the rest of the audience. I will be talking about Ted Cruz.
Okay.
Thank you for being conscientious.
Yeah, so anyone who needs to step away, do that now.
I just thought about that
so
one
I remember,
now, but continue.
I remember a while back on the show, you were talking about the feverishness of the conservatives to push for smaller elections like school board. And I actually got an email in my school email because I was in a bunch of politics clubs in my freshman year, and I got an email about the GOP literally training people how to run for like school board elections.
Interesting.
And there was the Leadership Institute is the name of the organization, and they had some stream on with Ted Cruz today about the whole school board thing, and it was basically what felt like a repeat like Cold War propaganda, because he equates critical race theory with Marxism without ever addressing Marxism. He just assumes, communism bad, essentially.
I mean, look, this is, they know what they're doing. They just have a couple of words that they think test poorly, and they just use them as some type of catch-all for anything that they that don't like. That's it. I mean, that's just basically their strategy, and they may not run out of words. I mean, it used to be communist. The socialist used to be, they used to use, so remember, I mean, it was Barack Obama is the Kenyan socialist, but they don't use that word anymore because it actually tests well. And so they switched to Marxism. That's the more, I don't know, darker, like the more like just, potentially more cryptic.
It does sound more infamous, potentially, yeah. But it just all feels the same when they just are so shameless in the way that they instantly link back to Marx, even though it's only Marxian in the way that it looks at, haves and have-nots, essentially.
Right.
And not actual economic.
Well, yes, but also what they call critical race theory is also not critical race theory.
It's largely unimportant.
Yeah, also true. The practice part of it is making its way. I just, a lot of it just seems fear-mongery and
of course
the same as the other previous red scares. It almost feels like
It's not like a red scare like communism, but it just feels sort of similar in the sense that they're just this person's critical race theory is that person, you know what I mean?
Yeah, the way you deal with that is you just replace those words with bad, and then you've got what they're doing. Appreciate the call.
Yeah.
Call from an 831 area code. Who's this? Where you call from?
Hello.
I am, barely. You gotta speak up a little bit.
Low phone.
Alright, need one moment.
I'm curious as to why you refer to it as a signal as opposed to the phone call. No, actually, that's worse. It sounds like you went further away from the planet that we're talking about.
Oh, way better.
Perfect. This is Gordon Black, support from the Vegas system, and I'm an alien rights activist.
Okay.
I'd like to talk to you for a little bit about a misconception that lots of people have about aliens. Lots of people say that getting probed is one of the worst things that can happen, but we find that generally humans actually quite enjoy being probed. That after they get probed, they end up hanging out in the area that we've abducted them from and generally try to get abducted again.
I mean, yeah, I know a lot of people who actually enjoy that.
Sorry, that didn't come out as funny as I thought it would. I actually have a normal question I'd like to talk about.
Yeah, let's go with that.
I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was pretty good. Blur.
Thanks. Yeah, so I know you folks focus mostly on worker issues, but I'd like to bring up something that's affected me as a very small business owner. I basically built and sell electronics by myself, and something that I haven't heard pretty much anybody talk about is how pretty much all of the Trump tariffs are back, or have never been, they're still around. Like, I end up buying circuit from China, and usually I have to pay up to a quarter in tariffs on it, which for someone like me is extremely prohibitive to my business. I know that there's still a lot of the bonding tariffs are still in place, and I was watching a graphic recently that was showing what sort of like the history of all of the largest exporters. You can see that the United States is on top pretty much from the 40s up until roughly 2016, when China is suddenly on top and the United States just plummets. And so, I don't know, I'm not sure if this is necessarily your wheelhouse, but I think that,
the supposed trade war with China that he launched simply, it just failed. Like,